On your feet! Get them going!
Oh, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever the case may be. Welcome to Cross Examinations Live. Share your referral link. What is this all about? What is going on here? I can't see the comments. Has anybody commented on anything? Let's see. Hi. Enter. Post. Okay, I can see that. This is terrible. Hold on. Let me try this. Okay, I can see that a little bit better. Terrible, terrible, terrible. My computer is being jerk again, so I didn't want to sit in there and fight with my computer. I need a new computer, honestly. Honestly, I need to find some way to just dump all that stuff off of my C drive. Honestly, for the life of me, I can't figure out how to get rid of stuff on my C drive. I'm not completely computer literate, but I'm too dumb to figure that out. Weather looks way nicer in Cali than it looks here in Louisiana. Well, Zach, that's because it is. It's actually beautiful. Oh my gosh, the sun feels so good. It feels so good. Welcome to the Reconstruction Zone. Sorry, I'm just gonna sit here and absorb sunlight for a while because oh gosh, it's so energizing. Reconstruction Zone, reconstructing faith, reconstructing the lie, not reconstruction live, but you know, rebuilding you from the lies the world has told. Just another rhino. What's up, Emerald? What's up, guys? I am a solar panel confirmed. You know, we're all solar panels. The more melanin you have in your skin, the better a solar panel you are. Melanin actually converts sunlight into energy more efficiently, 4 times more efficiently than chlorophyll. Chlorophyll, my friend chlorophyll over here. Back it up on an external drive. That's the thing. It's true. Sunlight does get great things for our bodies. Yes. That's the thing. I can't I have all this stuff on Dropbox, but my Dropbox is on my C drive. And then I thought, well, why is it on my C drive? It should just be on my Dropbox. And then I went to delete it from my C drive, and it was no longer on my Dropbox. And I'm like, what's the point of having Dropbox if you're just storing this stuff on your own computer? I mean, I thought that's why I had Dropbox, was so that I'm storing stuff in the cloud, which means I don't have to store it on my computer. Is this, have I been sold a bill of goods here? But it's clogged up my entire stinking C drive, and I don't know what I can get rid of on my Dropbox to free up that space. But this is not the point of this show. I'm just complaining why my stupid computer isn't working. Reconstruction Zone. Looks like a beautiful view behind. Yes, that is my view in San Diego. I'm a little inland, so we don't have the ocean view, but you can have a backup on your local drive. I think that's what it's using, though. I think Dropbox is a local server that you can connect to from other locations. Man, that's messed up. I thought Dropbox was like storage for my stuff I didn't want to keep on my computer. And now I'm struck with the reality that it's all a lie. It's all a lie. I have 2 other hard drives. How do I reroute my Dropbox stuff to my bigger hard drives, though? I don't know. I need IT, I think. That's Google Drive. Gotcha. So I have to pay for another stinking drive. That's great. It's actually getting pretty warm. I might move over to the seat over there that's not directly in the sun. Available offline. If a file is available offline, you can open it from the Dropbox folder on your computer or from the mobile device without needing to access the internet. Those files take up storage space. Thank you, Travis. Oh, did I highlight that? All right, you know, after a little while, even I can get a little come on, pillow. Sit appropriately so I can rest upon you. All right, so Reconstruction Zone. I had a topic. Oh yeah, old Earth versus young Earth creationism. So this weekend at Heroes Con, I met an old adversary who became a friend because eventually everyone realizes the truth. Oh, maybe not everyone, but eventually people realize the truth. And then I realized, that he's a Bible believing Christian, and it's like, how have we not been allies this entire time? I don't understand, but it doesn't matter. I'm more in G Drive and just got a crazy VEO sub. Your yuck flirts are only true Christians if you ask me. Haha, deathbed atheist. Yeah, I'm not a flurf. I just don't think the arguments hold up. I think some of the arguments are very interesting, but I don't they hold up. I don't think they hold up. Although it does cause me to question what is true and what isn't true. But I think the globe part is true. So I am a young Earth creationist. Yeah. And this other fella asked me a question because he's an old Earth creationist. And I'm like, I just don't think that adds up. And he's like, well, think about this. Every day of creation, and this is how I judge it's the evening and the morning. The evening and the morning was a day. The evening and the morning was a day, right? The seventh day, there is no evening and morning. And I'm like, I looked it up in the Bible and I'm like, what does that mean? So it's not like I instantly became an old Earth creation. It made me curious. Like, I feel like I need to cogitate on that and see see how people kind of wrap their heads around that. Why is there no evening and morning on the seventh day, on the day of rest? Let's see. If I hypothetically told you I knew how the world was created, but said you needed faith and I had no evidence to show you, would you still believe me? What? Oh, well, if you proved to me that you had knowledge from outside of time and space, and you told me you knew how the world was created, I would give you a lot more credence than just some random dude. And as for evidence, you can't. That was one of the arguments I was having with the guy. It's like uh, evolution, the age of the Earth, all of that stuff. That's all conjecture. That's can be none of that can be scientifically proven because history doesn't fall into the purview of science. There's a reason there are two different fields. If it is science, it must pass the scientific method test. You can't go back in time and scientifically prove George Washington crossed the Delaware. It is an historical event. It must be proven through historicity, right? It can't be proven through repeatability or, testing. It's not a testable event. It is a provable event through historical means and through archaeology. Now, is archaeology a science? Is it? Can you repeat archaeology? I think it's a totally different subset. And so claiming, oh, it's whichever direction you take it, you have to take it on faith because nobody was there except the one guy who was outside of time and space who told you what happened. He's the only one who was there. So he is actually the only one with any authority on the subject matter. Are historical events recorded in other religions? The stupid $ hides what you're saying. All right. The true, since they are untestable. Wait. Does or do events in the Bible have to be shown in a scientific context as possible? Again, it's the events in the Bible are historic. There are quote unquote scientific claims in the Bible, none of which have been contradicted by actual testable science. There are medical claims in the Bible, medical and health claims that have just been proven over time to be wiser than most of the history of mankind. But historical events cannot be scientifically tested. They can be attested by archaeological evidence, by other historical proofs. They're not testable and they are not repeatable. You can't test and repeat history. It's very simple to understand. The explanation by the physicist that wrote The Science of God using the speed of light to explain the days was quite interesting in my opinion. Oh, that'd be interesting to read. Go up. I asked many in a row. All right. Go up. I know. I can only see like 2 or 3, depending on how long they are, chats at a time. How much time passed between the 7th day and the fall? I have no idea. See, that's the thing. It's like if the 7th day has no evening and morning, are we in the 7th day now? I know we're in the rest of God now, right? We are in God's day of rest, had no evening and morning. It is a constant. So I walked in on 2 guys post office talking about the flat earth the other day. It was an interesting exchange. Have you looked into how Genesis is copied from Sumerian mythology? That's not accurate, actually. So what you have in terms of similarity, it's not just in Sumerian mythology. It's in folk religions around the globe, particularly the flood myth. But it's not just the flood myth. There are religious. I don't know if you call them traditions or rituals that are very Jewish, if you want to use the phrase, around the world in folk religions. There's a book called Eternity in Their Hearts that actually catalogs a lot. I don't know if it's exhaustive, but it catalogs a lot of things that mankind has shared culturally and religiously throughout, or from. Do you say pre-recorded history or whatever? It's like these traditions, these myths, these legends. It's not just Sumerian. It's all over the world, which means if you're judging that based on history, not based on what you want to believe that the Bible's copying stuff, that the recording in the Bible the stuff that Venn diagrams over, like Sumeria, like the Mao people in China have a very accurate flood myth. There's 300 different flood, quote unquote, myths around the world, 300 plus actually, that correlate in some way with um, Noah's tale, creation accounts that have very similar accounts. There's a in Machu Picchu. There's a creation pictograph that very much matches the biblical story, and all of this stuff correlates because the earlier you go in mankind's history, the more we remember this stuff the same way because it was real, because it's history. And now, because God wrote the Bible from outside of time and space, or He authored it, and the prophets wrote for Him, um, because He's outside of time and space, He is the best witness to tell those events as they happened. There's no game of helicopter with the scriptures because the scriptures were copied letter by letter perfectly. Otherwise, they were destroyed, even if it took 6 months to copy a scroll. So, whereas in Machu Picchu or the early Tongans, whoever it is around the world, they would, particularly if they didn't write this stuff down, they would have that sort of game of telephone, right? So it's like maybe Noah and his eight and the 8 people on the ark, becomes Noon and his family, right? And instead of a giant ark, it becomes a box or stuff like that, right? But I think because God is outside of time and space and the rest of mankind is not, He is the better choice to trust for authorship of how that all actually happened. I'm agnostic, globe O evolution. I'm agnostic, globe O evolution. Old Earth or young Earth is secondary issue, so it doesn't matter to me. Yeah, it's secondary. It's very much not. It's not a salvific issue, so I could prove to you I have knowledge, but if I did, you wouldn't have free will. You need pure faith in me. I could prove to you I have knowledge, but if I did, you wouldn't have free will. That's not true. What are you talking about? Um, you don't. You can absolutely 100% know who your father is and still reject him. You could know 100% what a fact is and still reject it. I see that happen all the time. That's just human nature. Humans are not robots. Are you saying the history in the Bible is conjecture? No. Do events in the Bible Brooklyn Lou, what's up, buddy? Can you admit that the belief you have that there is a God outside of space and time, while at the same time everywhere in this world, is just a belief you have? Can you admit that the belief you have that there is a God outside of space and time, while at the same time everywhere in this world is just a belief? I do not understand that question at all, Lou. Can you rephrase it, please? My questions predict the future. Huh? I used to live in Brooklyn, Park Slope Boulevard. Can you explain to me by what you mean by faith? I mean putting your beliefs into action. That's what I mean by faith. I can believe there's a chair sitting there in front of me, and to all appearances and to all my logic and reason, there is a chair in front of me. Faith is sitting in the chair. It's belief in action. Understand? Na, 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 called out, LOL. I read that there was some astronomers who were able to trace stars, planets to find out that there was a solar eclipse when Joshua was in the battle where God made the sun stand still. Really? Because from what I understood, and I'd have to check in on this again because it's been a really long time. But originally, all of the cultures on Earth had 360-day calendars, right? And people try to say it's because you're dividing your fingers and you're counting by digits and all of this stuff. But that doesn't really give you a good argument for why the sun is high. It's the days are longest and the days are shortest, 360 days apart. And then around the time of the Joshua story, the calendars started changing to 365.25 days. What could have caused the orbit of Earth to shift enough that we gained 5.25 days per year? I don't know. But could whatever that event have been cause the sun to stand still in the sky? I also do not know. It's all conjecture, so I can't lay any truth claims to it. But I thought that was a very interesting historical lineup with a astronomical event in the Bible. Never heard that thing about the seventh day before. Certainly food for thought, right? Right? I don't know what to think about it, but I'm going to think about it. Today definitely had an evening and a morning, right? Well, I've had a morning so far. I have not had an evening yet. But evening and morning, that's why the Jews start their day in the evening, right? The evening and the morning was a day. It wasn't the morning and the evening was a day. It was the evening and the morning was a day. Even more evidence. I don't know what that means, Travis. If we don't know the time that passed between the seventh day and the fall, how can we deduce how old the earth is from the Genesis account? Because it says how old Adam was. This is all derived from the ages given in Genesis of how old all of the people were, how old they were when they had their kids, how old their kids were when they had their kids, and then how old they were when they died. It's it's pretty much math. How would folk religions survive all around the world if everyone but Noah died? Is this a serious question? Are you So Noah and his family, they had kids, and their kids had kids, and their kids had kids. And several generations down, a guy named Peleg was born. And the Bible says, in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. Now, some people conjecture that that means that the single landmass that was the earth was divided into continents. That would be quite an upheaval. Some people conjecture that it was in Peleg's time that the Tower of Babel happened. So, in either case, this is when the earth was at some, whether it's Babel, Peleg, whatever it is, the people separated to the different parts of the world. This is about 4,500 BC. Now, a group of them went over to the ancient Orient, founded a little country called China, and started communicating with each other with pictographs, right? Those pictographs have some very, very interesting meanings, none of which make any sense unless you know the history shared by the book of Genesis. Example. It's like, look, I'm creating a language in pictographs. I want a tree. So what do? I draw a tree. Hey, we know what we're talking about together, right? I draw a tree, you know it means tree. How about a man? How about a little guy walking? That's a man. How about a man with long hair? Woman. Right. How about how about a snake? How about a snake? I'll just draw a line like a little snake. Snake. We know what a snake is. We can share that because we're drawing pictures and creating a language, right? How do you how do you picture temptation? Hmm. How would you picture temptation? Well, here's the thing. If you're familiar with the book of Genesis, you might say, okay, what was the first temptation? Well, you had a woman, you had a snake, and you had these two trees, tree of life and tree of good and evil. Now, if you understood the book of Genesis, or if you understood the true history of mankind because it's a shared history, you might draw a woman and a snake and two trees and show it to another guy who can't speak your language because you don't understand each other because of the Tower of Babel. And he'd understand that you're drawing a picture of temptation. Funny, that's what the pictograph for temptation is in Chinese. Isn't that weird? Hmm. How about arc? You want to draw an arc. How about if you have a man, I think it's a man in a boat with eight mouths. So eight and a mouth indicates a living person, right? How about if you put eight mouths in a boat and we make that the pictograph for an arc? Huh? That would make sense if you knew about Noah's Ark, wouldn't it? Weird. Strange thing. You know when this language was developed? You know when this pictogram started? 4,500 years ago. What a coincidence! That's around the time of the Tower of Babel. Weird. There's an entire book on all of these different pictographs in the Chinese language, which was developed around just after the time of the Tower of Babel and the division of the people on the planet, where none of these things make any sense outside of knowing the story of Genesis. How do you figure that in your little head? Everyone but eight people. People around the world record the global flood. Flood happens. Everyone but eight people, right? People around the world record the global flood. It's so logical. You don't understand the math here? The eight people are the only people left on Earth. Therefore, everyone is descended from the eight people. Therefore, all the people that spread around the world remember that they started at eight people and that there was a global flood. Where's your That's a perfect, absolutely perfect, logical. This one thing follows the other. What are you talking about? If I based it upon your standards, it had to be true. Well, what I'm saying is basing it on what history judges to be true through any other issue item telling in history is that when you have corroborating reports of an event from disconnected, disparate people, it's evidence that the event is true. The global flood is the most corroborated story in history of mankind, at least in ancient history, before we could record stuff like, with cameras. But for some reason, guys like you when it comes to the global flood and the fact that it is the most validated ancient historical event, you just throw the rules of history out of the window, not because it's not true, because you don't want it to be true. Funny that. Jeff says, for people who think the Bible is fantasy and that there is no God, atheists seem obsessed with those subjects. That's true. Travis, you left too. So what happened? Mom died, parents got divorced, somebody in your family got killed, some what prayer? I hate to be flippant about this, but this is how atheists are born. What prayer did God fail to say yes to that you rejected him and thus religion with your emotional anger? What's up? No classroom today. My computer is being gay. I can't deal with it. Christianity isn't religion, it's a faith. It's true. Biblically, story says firmament, clay, seal, etc. are all flat earth things. No, I believe the firmament was either. I know some people say this has fallen out of vogue, but I still think it's accurate. I think there was an ice canopy or a water canopy around the globe because it just makes perfect sense with how lush and green the entire planet was at the time, and it also it explains very well how we flash froze some animal creatures like Siberian woolly rhinos and mastodons with green leafy vegetables, tropical vegetables still in their mouths and stomachs, which had not either digested or, I mean, the imprint of their teeth was still on the vegetables in their mouths, so they had to be flash frozen. The only way I can conjecture or theorize that happened is an instant atmospheric collapse, which is something that could have happened during the collapse of the firmament, which thus took time before, and that's why Noah was in that very, very, I mean, he was in an ark with one freaking square 18 by 18 inch window, so he would have been protected from the atmospheric issues happening around him, not just the water, but the earth was probably. I don't know if the whole Earth was, but I wouldn't doubt if the whole Earth was freaking freezing. That doesn't mean all of the water was frozen at once, but evidence that those mastodons were flash frozen it's just fact. So how do you account for flash frozen tropical creatures and plant life? I account for it with an instant collapse of the atmosphere, which would coincide with a firmament shell type atmosphere being broken and the atmosphere having to basically rebuild itself over the 120 days Noah was. Is that right? Was it 120 days? Noah was in the ark. All right. Why is the flat Earth story wrong when the rest of it is right? The Bible doesn't say the Earth is flat. Christianity is based off of Paul's teachings to not follow Jesus when he said we should obey the old laws of Moses forever. What? He doesn't say follow the old laws of Moses forever. He said, I have come to fulfill the law. Christianity is a cult. Define cult, Dennis. Because if you go back to the meaning of cult, cult is actually a word that means a derivation of Christian theology. So, like, basically a heretical take on Christianity. So it's hard for Christianity to be a cult if a heretical take on Christianity defines what a cult is. Jesus fulfilled no messianic prophecies and was killed for blasphemy. Oh, you're one of those Justin guys. You're here from the deconstruct. Okay, go read Isaiah 53, and without Justin's bullcrap filling your head, it is literally the dumbest claim. It is such a dumb claim. Atheist cousin on your shirt, don't want misgender Lucy's uncle. What? Sub whore called, he wants his underwear back. Brooklyn Lou, do you understand? All of us do not base our beliefs on mythology. Some of us withhold judgment until we get real evidence, not just stories. And many of you, you included, Lou, simply reject evidence because you don't want to believe in it. That's why there's no real such thing as proof, right? Because proof is very subjective. Proof is when someone looks at evidence and agrees that it proves a point. But two people can look at the exact same evidence, and one to one, they can say it proves the point, and to the other, they can say it does not prove the point, and therefore they discount it as evidence. So you claiming it's real evidence, that's just your subjective opinion based on your desire to reject God. That is an emotional response, not a logical one. Dennis Humble says, outside of time and space, so he doesn't exist. God got it. No, it's just we can't comprehend because we are linear beings within and bound by and only speaking language that derive time and space. Because we are within time and space. God being outside of and throughout time and space because it's part of his creation, or it is his creation, is simply not comprehensible to the linear. Apprehendable. We can apprehend what God is, but there's no way for us as linear beings to fully comprehend. Subword doesn't. I mean, you reject it because you don't have faith. That's the point. I reject what? I reject what now? Sorry. Is this wobbling? Because I feel like maybe I've got a little. All I've had today is coffee, so I might be shaking just a little bit. Speak for yourself. I am a robot, says King Bob. I mean, a big bomb exploded, and we call it the Big Bang, right? Faith is believing in an invisible chair, then sitting in it. No. So, belief does not simply derive from what's in front of your eyes, right? Belief can be derived from the evidence of action, the evidence of emotion is an evidence, right? Do I have faith that my wife loves me? Yes. Can I see it? Can I touch it? I mean, I can touch her, but it is the evidence of the relationship, right? It's like trusting in a friend. You can't just blindly give your faith to a friend and hope that they don't betray it. But in reality, when you develop a friendship with somebody, you tend to have a history of evidence based on experience, not based on material, right? So if God has seen you through things, God has given you little miracles here and there throughout your life, that is very strong, albeit subjective, I will admit, evidence that God is real and worthy of putting your faith into. I have had many scenarios like that, but my faith came through a study of the scripture and what I thought would be ridiculous claims that the Bible made about such things as prophecy, scientific medical foreknowledge, stuff like that. And then when I challenged those ridiculous assertions, I found they held water, particularly the prophecy. Now, you can dismiss the prophecy all you want. That's an emotional response, but there's a historical reality to the prophecy. That's why it's historical. That's why it's I would say provable, because it proved to me as an agnostic You may be new here. I came to faith from being an agnostic, and all of these evidences to me add up to God being something worth putting my faith in. Now, I can understand. And look, I've had plenty of grief in my life, so I'm right there with you. I'm sure whatever your grief was that caused you to reject God, that was you having a personal event that was evidence to you that God wasn't listening. I understand that. It is 99% of atheists, same story, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't spend your time trying to tear down other people's faith. But it's evidence. That's your evidence, and that is why you no longer put your faith in God, right? Whereas when my nephew died and my unborn child's children died and my dad died and my mother-in-law died, when all these people died, I just realized that's every life comes with a death. We had this discussion yesterday. So I don't think someone dying is evidence that God doesn't exist. God saying no to your prayer is not evidence that God doesn't exist. Let's see. One time. How did a complex God evolve without matter to think and process thoughts? See, you're bound by linear material thought. God is outside of time and space. His word is creation. So he says it is, and thus it is. There's no evolution there. Also, you're also bought into the whole evolution nonsense. So, see, you're locked into a mind state, and it's like trying to take your perspective and force an eternal, all-knowing, all-powerful God into a matchbox of how you can comprehend. But as I explained to you, you cannot comprehend because we are bound by time space. We are bound through linear experience. God is without linear experience. Why do you think 5,000 other religions exist? Demons or people made them all up because they like to lie and con people? Depends on the religion. Like I said, a lot of those folk religions derived from what I believe is just a shared faith, like Zoroastrianism. I believe that's just a derivation of Davidic Judaism. And again, the early people, the early people of China, they worshipped a god called Shang-Ti. Shang-Ti means heavenly emperor. The first, or one of the first royal families in China was the Shang dynasty. They named themselves after Shang-Ti. And then that dynasty decided that only the royal family was good enough to worship the one true God. So anyone else who wanted to worship had to worship the royal family. There's 5,000 other origins for religions. That could some of them be demons? Yeah, 100%. Could some be Nephilim that like created, you know, the Nephilim that went into legend, that went into mythology, that became religions, that shared these, Jupiter and Zeus and Thor, and they all sort of have a similar pantheon. Entirely possible, but again, that's all conjecture. could. I'm trying to think. I think it was Papua New Guinea that had the scapegoat. Right, the scapegoat is a very Jewish. It's a biblical tradition, and somehow or another, the religions maintained that part of the. But stuff changes over time. It's been thousands of years, so there's probably as many different ways to start a religion as say someone going and living a freaking debauched life coming out of one religion and then going and sitting under a peach tree starving himself for 2 weeks until he started hallucinating and deciding that he was the key to nirvana, and then got suckers to follow him. Right? That's Buddhism, by the way. That's how Buddhism started. Siddhartha Buddha. He was a rich dude. He was a rich dude coming out of Hinduism, which Hinduism believes in like 3 million gods. So I don't know how that works. There's a god for everything. There's a god for my glass. There's a god of coffee. There's a god of chairs. There's a god of whatever, everything. That's just idolatry. And then Buddha was like, he was a rich dude because he was in the highest class, because that's how Hinduism works, right? Like the higher class and stuff. Does that work, Walt? My neighbor's putting out a exercise thing. Oh yeah, Buddha. And so then after he did all the debauchery that a young rich dude could do, Kanye, he went crazy, went and sat under a peach tree. I think he was trying to starve himself to death, and started hallucinating. And then in his hallucination, he decided that he had reached nirvana or some crap like that. And then got a bunch of, hey, look, Charles Manson started a religion. What do you want? It happens. It's mankind's desire to worship something, right? It's that God seed in your heart. You have a desire to worship something. If you're not going to worship God, you're going to worship some nut under a peach tree. You're going to worship some cult leader that will carve a swastika in his forehead. You're going to worship money. You're going to worship sex. You're going to worship your own intellect. You're going to worship something. So, Brooklyn Lou, other than a belief that you have, how do you know there is a God outside of space and time? Do you know something nobody else knows? Yeah, the Bible speaks from outside of space and time. We've been through this, Lou. Coming in this from agnosticism, I challenged the claims of the Bible, and then I researched the answers to those claims. And because I was agnostic and not an angry, bitter atheist who didn't want to believe, I could see that those claims actually held water because I wasn't emotional about it. I didn't really have a dog in the fight. I was literally agnostic. I was a true agnostic, not an atheist. I didn't have a desire for there not to be a God. I was just like, I don't know. What you got? Show me. And I did the research and I saw that sorry, guys who claim there's no prophecy, there is prophecy, and that prophecy is accurate, and that prophecy proves to me, because I was not unwilling to believe like atheists are, and that's the claim, right? I was a true agnostic. Um, it was evidence to me that God was outside of time and space. And don't say, do you know something nobody else knows? Everybody who objectively looks at this, not subjectively with your hate towards God or your desperate desire to prove God doesn't exist, but people who are honestly agnostic and look at the evidence will see that yes, God actually wrote stuff from outside of space-time. The Bible clearly says morning and day. What? No, it says evening and morning. The evening and the morning were the first day. Right? Not morning and day. Again, atheists insist that there is no God, and yet they obsess over him and those that do believe. Well, I would just say if you're actually an atheist, that's kind of a total waste of your time, isn't it? Why proselytize nothing? Why proselytize a non-belief? That doesn't make any sense. It's an emotional argument. It's not a logical one. It's like, I'm so logical, I must make sure everyone agrees with my logic. No, it's emotional. You don't believe in God. You've rejected God, so you want other people to reject him because misery loves company. You guys obsess over an invisible space zombie. No, we love an invisible space zombie. We love God, and we see the benefits of loving God, and therefore we want other people to love God as well because of the benefits. Tell me what the benefits of atheism is. Makes no sense. Argue something you don't believe. Complete madness. Yeah. We're not the ones here trying to convince us otherwise for no apparent reason, right? Is there any physical evidence for Peleg? This sounds made up. Honestly, that's a great question. But before about 20 or 30 years ago, you atheists were making that same argument about Pontius Pilate, weren't you? Weren't you? You were saying there's no physical evidence for Pontius Pilate. He sounds made up. Then what did they find? They dug up an old amphitheater where Pontius Pilate had his own personal seat carved into the stone. Whoopsie! Yeah, your absence of evidence is evidence of absence arguments. They don't work. I'll just put it that way. Lou says, I do not insist there is no God. I have no good reason to think there is, but ultimately, I will try to make everyone agree with me that there is no God. I mean, I do not know. Thou dost protest too much, Brooklyn Lou. But we have scientific evidence that's saying humans left Africa about 70,000 years ago. Do you? Or do you have DNA evidence showing that there was one single human source for DNA? The 70,000 years ago thing is conjecture. But I will agree with you that humans came from one single source of DNA. Your argument is not helping you. So are you saying that all the people between 70,000 and 6,000 years ago didn't exist? You recognize their ancestors today? No, I think that the math is wrong on that. That's all. Because I decide what I do believe based on evidence. No, you don't. You decide it based on what evidence you accept, not what evidence is real. It's very subjective. Order of magnitude wrong than what mythology guessed. Cool. Have any papers on that? I don't know what you're talking about. Wanting to go to heaven sounds like a big temptation. It wasn't really my motivation. Although it did open me up. Wanting to not, actually, it was not so much wanting to go to heaven. It was, I was reading a book about near-death experiences, and I know it's a heretical book, but Betty J. Eady, Embraced by the Light, and she said that all the wrongs that you have done will be visited upon you 10 times, tenfold, before you can enter heaven. So basically, she was saying you had to go through hell to get to heaven. And well, I didn't like that idea. So actually, that's what led me to pray for the first time. And then my prayer was answered very quickly. And then I prayed a second time, and it was answered very quickly. And I'm like, that opened up my mind to like, is there something to this Bible stuff? So it's like my mind was It's not like that I was like particularly close to. I was just raised to believe you couldn't know. I was raised by an agnostic father, and he's like, you just can't know this stuff. So don't. Why waste your time on it? Da, 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 da. Humans make up story about scary snake. You're just ignoring the whole. You're just ignoring the whole Chinese, the Genesis story written in the Chinese language thing, aren't you? You're just gonna pretend I didn't say that. You can go look it up for yourself, homie. Corpse grinder. Obviously, a woman, two snake, and two trees. All right. Tell you what is today? Oh, today's Friday. On Monday or Tuesday, we'll go through it. All right. I will go through it with you guys. There's a whole mess of these pictographs that express stuff no one could understand outside of the biblical story of Genesis. I was assuming this is a public platform and seen Mike live. I assume you knew since you sounded academic. Again, I don't know. I'm behind in the chat, so unless you're, this is not how conversations work on Facebook, on YouTube. So I'm responding to something. It takes me time to respond to the thing, and therefore, if you're just responding to something I say, and then I read it 15 minutes later, it's going to be completely without context to me. So I can't. Only one truth based, the rest are pretenders, right? I had a thought that my skill in art is about the same as that of a caveman. I suppose that's good company. Sounds like BS. Who isn't? See, again. So descendants wouldn't remember anything because they weren't alive. No, they're called stories you pass down. You get stories. Like, I know my mom's stories, and I tell my grandchildren my mom's stories. You know, that's how unwritten histories are. I know you're smart enough to know this stuff. You can type and read English, so I guarantee you're smart enough to understand this stuff. 2 people in the 8 people equals lots of inbreeding. Well, that's a different issue, isn't it? So if you follow along the biblical story, Adam and Eve were created in the image and likeness of God, which means their DNA was perfect, right? Everything God created was perfect. Over time, you know how genetics work, where it's like, I'll give you some of my DNA, you give me some of your DNA. Sometimes some DNA is lost. DNA is never gained. So it's like, over time, the more you divide and remerge, I don't know how to say it. It's like the family line. The genetics get more and more, what's the word? Narrow. Bottleneck. Genetics get bottleneck. We see this in breeding dogs, right? We purposefully breed dogs, and we breed traits out of them. When you are trying to breed a pedigree dog, you're not introducing a new DNA. What you're doing is you're trying to breed the genetic variation out of the breed, so that you can take the say you have litters, and like you have one of the litters has a bunch, spotted dog, black dog, brown dog, white dog, and then you have another litter over here, and it's spotted dog, brown dog, gray dog, splotchy dog, white dog, right? You take the 2 white dogs and you breed them, and then you get white dog, brown dog, black dog, and then you do that again over here, and then you breed the white dogs until you get white dog, splotchy dog, and then you do it again. It's purposeful pedigree breeding where you're breeding out all the genetic variation. Well, we could do this deliberately with dogs, which proves the case that in man, it's like you've got some people, they're like, oh, I like them redheads. Yeah. And then I'm a redhead, and I like the redheads. And then we go hang out with other redheads, and they like them redheads. So you end up with Ireland, right? Oh, I like them. I like I like dark-skinned women. And then I'm a dark-skinned man, so I'm gonna like that dark skin. And then you end up with sub-Saharan Africa, whatever it is. So you breed out the genetic variation, which weakens the species, which causes, have you ever seen some of those really bizarre looking chihuahuas, because they've been breeding chihuahuas so long that they're starting to break down their DNA? That's what inbreeding does, right? Because you've come to a point where you've bottlenecked your DNA so much that you're causing genetic problems. Well, you don't have that issue when you're close enough to the perfection of the original design that there are no genetic imperfections. So actually, you don't have to implement a law against quote unquote inbreeding, which is, or what's it called? What's the word for it? I'm sorry, I'm blanking out. And it's overtime. I'm going to scroll to the bottom because somebody will be saying it. You don't need to implement a law against inbreeding until the genetic bottlenecking has come to a point where it becomes a problem, right? That's why it wasn't a problem in the beginning. It wasn't even a problem in Moses's day when Moses implemented it. Do you know that Moses was inbred? Moses's mother was Moses's father's aunt. So even in Moses' day, people were inbreeding, but it wasn't causing a problem. In fact, I don't know how far along you had to get for it to be a problem genetically, but Moses just kind of, God had Moses write the law. That was the point in time when they're like, all right, no more inbreeding. Got to stop this bottlenecking. And so that all makes perfect rational sense. God never wrote about a flat earth, Travis. Sorry, I know some of you guys like to say that, but I don't see it. All right. Ice canopy over the flat earth. No, the ice canopy was around the whole earth, in my understanding. All right. That's it. Audio is being gat to. Is it really bad? Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for being here. It's 1:04, so I'm over time, but this is a fun episode. Thank you, Travis and Travis, Corpse Grinder, Lou. Thanks for coming in and trying to argue for your non-belief. Excellent use of your time, proselytizing non-belief, so that you can get other people to be just as miserable as all the other atheists. God bless you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.